Kelly.
Here.
Member Lo-
Thank you very much for your attendance. Now I'd like for everyone to rise for a moment of silence and the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So tonight we have new audio. I hope this is helping everybody hear better, because we're speaking through masks because we're trying to curb the coronavirus. So hopefully this is more clear for everyone at home as well as in the audience. Pursuant to KRS 132.027, the City of Dayton will hold a public hearing for the proposed purpose of hearing comments from the public regarding the 2021 proposed tax rate. We'd like to open up for public hearing, so if anybody would like to approach it.
The presentation first?
Sure, yeah, that sounds great, Jay.
Okay. Mayor Baker asked me to put together some slides here to kind of explain the public, to the public hearing, the tax rate that's being proposed right now. So let me go ahead and sit down here and show you these slides. So I'm recommending to the City Council that we approve the real property tax rate of 0.434%. This is the 4% that increase that is permitted under Kentucky law. They call it the compensating rate. This was enacted several years ago by the legislature to limit the amount that cities can raise taxes, but recognizing that cities, like everybody else, incurs expenses every year that increase because of inflation. So they allow us to raise it 4% to reflect that increase. So a homeowner with a $100,000 house, let me get my microphone here in case people at home can hear me on our live feed. A homeowner of a $100,000 house would now pay $434 in city taxes compared to this year, which was $422. That's a $12 increase over last year's tax rates. Now, why did I recommend to City Council that we increase this? Well, primarily because we had a major budget amendment we had to make in July. In July, we amended our fiscal year 21-22 budget to pay an additional $257,000 in salaries and pension costs for our police and firefighters. Probably had in the city, and you may have been here, you may have seen it if you were at the City Council meeting a couple of months ago or read about it in the news media, is our firefighters made a very passionate plea about why they needed to be receiving higher rates of pay, and our fire chief indicated that we were losing many of our firefighters, and the same thing is happening in our police department because our pay is substandard compared to other communities. So we really had no choice if we wanted to continue to maintain quality police and fire departments to increase the salaries for those individuals as first responders. So the City Council voted to do that by raising it $257,000 in this fiscal year. So, so the proposed tax rate will generate about $100,000. It's only going to pay for about 40% of that $257,000. So we still have to find the rest of that amount, and we may have to. We're not sure how we're going to do that yet. It may be cutting back some sort of services, or hopefully not laying off anybody. We don't think that's going to happen, but there are things we will need to do to adjust the budget to reflect the additional amount of money we need to find. In addition to the $257,000 that we didn't expect to have to pay this year, our costs are going up too. Our insurance, our pension costs in particular are going up. The state is raising our pension costs 12% a year for the next 10 years. It's an unsustainable system that we currently have with our CRS, our state pension system, but we have no choice. They directed that we must pay into it, and with that we must do under state law. So in addition to the cost that we have with fire and policemen salaries, we also have many other expenses. Our gasoline's going up just like everybody else's. insurance is going up, all types of things go up 4%. So this helps us deal with those increases in costs in the next year. Okay, so historically, people say, well, we raised, you know, I'm hearing a lot of misinformation on the internet and on social media feeds, and one of the things you hear is they keep on raising the rates. Well, that's simply not true. This is the last 9 years in the city, and the tax rates have been passed by the city council. From 2013 to 2019, the rate stayed set the same at 4.45. Last year, because we had an increase in the assessed value in the city, that rate actually went down. We were able to take 4%, but it went down to 4.34. So what I'm proposing is that we simply take the 4% this year. Unfortunately, we had a bit of a gap. We had some nice development in the city that went on the tax rolls, but the past year there's not been that development. Next year, I'm explaining a little bit, we will see a more of a assessed value in the city, but this year we did not see it, so that's the reason why we weren't able to reduce our rate this year. And so it's basically going up 1 cent more this year than it has done, than the rate was in 2013 through 2019. 1 cent more is all it is compared to those previous years. So where does the money go? All the tax revenue from the city's annual worm taxes, that's what they call this tax on your real property, are required to go into the city's general fund by Kentucky law. So that fund is what funds all our departments, our police, fire, public works, administration, streets, sidewalks, all that is done through the general fund. So that's where it goes, and then it's parsed out to these various different departments. So none of the city's tax revenues goes to the schools. Some people thought that some of that money goes to schools. They tax differently. On your tax bill you get from the city, it's our ad valorem taxes, our park tax, and your waste fee. Your county tax has the city of, or the Dayton Independent Schools tax on it. And you'll see it's substantially higher than our tax. Our tax is 0.43 per 100 this past year. Theirs was $1.06 per 100. So a lot of people get confused thinking that the school tax and the city tax are together. They're completely separate. They're a separate taxing entity, and they generally take the 4% every year, as I understand it. So one of the questions is, we have 3 TIF districts in the city. We have Manhattan Harbor, we have Red Knob on the Hill, and we have Grant Park. And the question is, well, how are these properties taxed? And it's a little complicated, but I want to give you a short little description of how that's done. These properties are taxed at the full rate, just like every property in the city. The difference is that there's a TIF agreement. So that basically says that of that taxes that come in, these taxes from the apartment complexes on the river, the newer homes down there, they come into the city, but we only get to keep 20% of that for our general fund. 80% goes back towards all the infrastructure improvements that have been done and will continue to be done. Building that road, filling in the riverfront, sewers, electric, all the thing that went into infrastructure development for those homes and those apartments is paid from those 80%. Now the thing is, this goes on for 30 years. We're in year 8 of this project, so if you take it on out, we're going to get 20% of that amount for another 27 years or 22 years, unless all the infrastructure gets paid and then, you know, that gets accelerated. But right now we're only getting 20%. Red Knot has not been activated yet as a TIF, but it will be in probably in the next year or so. And Grant Park is also a TIF, and it has a different setup. But this is just an example of how it works. So we're only seeing a small portion of those tax revenues from those TIFs.
And that's strictly property tax.
That's strictly no. That's payroll tax, property tax, any taxes that are in that TIF area all go to that fund. So it's an addition. So payroll taxes,
insurance taxes?
Insurance taxes are not included in that. Okay. And then, so that's the wrong way. Okay, another question, what about the COVID-19 money the city received? So we did receive some funding last year, and we got some in this budget year, but the federal government has imposed some very strict rules about how we can use this money. For instance, we can't use it to cover fully pension costs. We'd love to do that, but they say we can't do that. As I mentioned, it's increasing 12% a year over the next 10 years. under the American Rescue Act, money that we recently got, this money can only be used for things like affordable housing, sewer projects, stormwater issues, and broadband infrastructure. There are other things, and one is premium pay, but generally it's very limited in how we can use that. So we were able to use some of the premium pay for our police officers and firefighters to recognize the work they did during the pandemic, but we aren't allowed to use these funds for future salaries of employees. We're not allowed to do that. So these funds are very restrictive on how we can use them. Okay, and finally, the big question, are taxes expected to increase next year? No, we believe because there's a 1-year gap basically between when a building is built and goes on the tax rolls or when it's sold, and that new values reflect on the tax rolls. We have the new Gateway building built on the riverfront. That is not on this year's tax rolls. It will be reflected on next year's tax rolls. The Manhattan, the Tapestry Apartments, now called Manhattan on the river, I think there. It sold this year and doubled in value. Unfortunately, that won't be reflected in this year's taxes or assessed value. That's reflected next year. So those two projects in and of themselves, we believe, will actually increase the total assessed value of the property in the city, and we're hopeful that we can do what we did last year and actually reduce the tax rate accordingly. So no, we don't think the taxes will increase next year. We think because of the additional development, we will actually have an opportunity to reduce them. So that, in a nutshell, is the background about the tax rates and why I'm recommending to you all to accept the 4% increase.
Thank you, Administrator Foster, for that slideshow and the explanation of your recommendation for the 4%. I know there's been a lot of chatter on all around town about this, and I'd like to now open up the podium to anybody who would like to discuss this with the city. Ask questions to us, be blunt with us, please, and get our responses. So if you'd like to please address council, the podium is available for you. Stand up, state your name and your address.
Can you please turn me? Thank you.
Hello, Sarah Shepherd, 111 Fifth Avenue, here in the bright sunny Dayton, Kentucky. Thank you for giving a lot of the questions I had. You actually answered in your slideshow, so thank you for that. Point of clarification: when you say that Kentucky pension is going up 12% for the next 10 years, is that 12% every year?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you say that the abated properties, such as the Tapestry or whatever it is now, are going to increase next year, but we're still expecting these increases in pension and other type of payroll, why even promise the public that there's potential of reducing it at all?
We don't have a choice, so we're only allowed to raise it 4%. So if our assessed value of all the property in the city goes up to a certain level, that 4%, we can raise it, but it's going to be less than what our current tax rate is. So they don't have to, they could not raise it by 4%, but raise it by 4%, the tax rate actually is going to go down next year if it's going to be similar to what happened last year. Does that make sense?
No.
Probably confusing. Okay.
It is confusing.
So the total tax rolls in the city, the value of the property in the city rises.
Correct.
Because of these two new developments, okay? And so because of that, when you calculate the tax rate, it's actually going to be less, even with the 4% increase, it's going to be less next year than this year because the total revenue generated in the city is higher this next year than it was this year.
Yeah.
Is that understandable?
Yeah, but what I'm asking is if we are expecting a continual 12% increase in pensions every year and an increase in salary and other payroll items, why would you discuss about potentially lowering the property rate for fiscal year 24, because that's when it would be.
Yeah, well.
Rather than maintaining it or continuing at the 4% increase.
We could increase it more than 4% if we wanted to do that, but that would require, vote. That would be a vote from the citizens. if we go up to 4%, we don't have to handle those the citizens, and I don't think the citizens want us to go any higher than 4% anyway, based on what conversations I'm hearing. But ideally, we would like to generate more money. The only way to do that is increase your tax rate above the 4%, and then it's subject to a referendum, or, might be easier if I take this off, or you continue to increase the value of your property in your city, and as your value of property goes up, so does the amount of money you get in, because of the tax rate. But you can see, the state won't let us go more than 4% without a vote of the citizens.
Yeah, I mean, I work at a university, we do the same thing, you can only raise it so much.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay.
If I could, it's not the rate that we can raise 4%, it's the income from the property
That is
tax.
absolutely correct.
So if our property value were to double, we could cut our property tax rate in half and add 4% more,
Revenue.
whatever,
Okay.
tax rate for 4% more revenue, not tax rate. That's where I think a lot of confusion comes in, because our tax rate right now is 4.34.
Right.
Right.
So we can't raise it to 8%. It's based on what that property tax brings in.
Right, so my question was, so 20, you reduced the rate, and we're.
We still took the 4%.
Okay, I guess I just have to learn.
Yeah,
what
we
my
still
tax
took the
rate
4%,
is.
but because the value of the property city was so much higher than the year before, the
Alright,
rate went down.
I guess what Ms. Shepherd's asking is, we anticipate our costs to continue to rise due to the pension crisis that
Yes.
is happening in Kentucky.
yes,
How are we as a city, believing that we'll be able to decrease next year? Am I correct in?
yeah, like if
Your
if we know we have all these expected expenditures, and this is part of the subsidy, why would we reduce those costs to, again, essentially create havoc like happened on Facebook, is right now we're paying 4.x%, and now we're asking you to be paying 4.y, even though it was a cent higher than 19, why reduce that rate at all and just continue at least at a standard, so.
We don't have a choice. We can only take 4%, and that is going to reduce the rate if the
Okay.
property value in the whole city is much higher than it is right now.
Gotcha.
And the only way we could take more than 4% is to vote to do that, and then it would go before the community as a referendum, they could decide whether they wanted to do that.
On the ballot.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Shepherd? I'm not sure.
It does.
Perhaps this might help. In 2020, when the tax rate was set, the city didn't have a choice but to lower it back down because of the revenue.
Right.
So it was involuntarily, it's not that they made the arbitrary decision, they had to reduce it down.
Right, we didn't have a choice, because our tax rolls increased substantially that year.
They're not playing games with it, they're just, that's what they were mandatorily had to do.
Yeah, I got it. And how often is property assessed?
Every 4 years.
So-
Reassess.
What's that?
The rotation is every 4 years where they look at it again.
Yeah, they do, we met with the PDA earlier this week, and he explained that they do like 3 or 4 different sectors in the county. And Newport, Bellevue, and Dayton, I think, is in one sector, and they do that every 4 years. And then you remember when he said they last did it?
It's been a while.
But they do it every 4 years. Each sector they do a different year. So, and maybe it's 4 sectors, and each year they do a different sector. So I think it's coming up in the next year or two. I think a reassessment in our community.
Okay.
Actually, they just reassessed
They did
last
The
year.
rate went down.
last year. Okay, that's okay.
2020.
So then we have 3 more years before we reassess again.
Just so people know, 2020 was the first time the PDA reassessed properties in Dayton in 16 years. And I say that because we met with them. And part of the reason was in 2008, you had a sharp decline in the economy, so they reassessed nobody. 2012, the economy hadn't caught up yet, and they didn't reassess anybody. In 2016, there was a glitch in their process, and they skipped Dayton. So,
you know, property values remain the same. And I know because I was looking on rolls and you could see where a house was valued in 2000. Now, if you bought a house or sold a house, it changed, obviously. But for the most part, people that were standard, sitting there and owning the same property, they didn't get reassessed for a long time, so. But it should be in 2024, I believe.
I think that's right, reset.
Should be our next reassessment from PBA.
And when I met with him, I gave him documentation showing what the sales price was for the Tapestry Apartments, so that he knows exactly what the value of that property is, and that that's accurately reflected in the next evaluation. The only other company, new properties that come online, and remodeled properties and sold properties are assessed in the year that happens. Like I said, there's a 1 year lag, but those will be reassessed, and that's why we think the tax rate will go down next year, because we have 2 large properties that are going on the tax roll next year.
One which is changing, am I allowed to mention that?
What's that?
Am I allowed to mention the value?
Yeah, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, one of which is changing from 35 million.
32.
32 million to 70?
To 69.5. It's more than doubling. That the Tapestry
The
Apartments.
Tapestry, the Bourbon, or Manhattan, what do they call it? It is increasing from 32 to $70 million.
So I did have questions about those properties with the basements. I realize that they're good for business. So how many more properties do we foresee coming in at that 30-some or whatever abatement that puts the city in the bind? And are there any that are close to being done? And if yes, what are the plans of using that money?
We have like 3 active development sites on Manhattan Harbor right now that are under construction, some further along than others. And there's an opportunity for one other large development site near the marina as well. There's some discussion there, but it's very preliminary. So, yes, there's a number of sites there. Plus, we have a number of people interested in infill housing in Dayton now. So we could see some of these empty lots, I think, in the future being replaced with new housing. And of course, Red Knot is another development. It's in a TIF, and that TIF's not been activated yet. In other words, we're getting full value right now, and once I think that they have pretty much fully developed, they'll activate that TIF, and at that point, we'll receive only 20%. I don't know, maybe more than 20%. I wasn't here when that TIF was done, but I think it might be 30%. I can't remember, but it's it will receive a percentage of it.
I think it's a 50-50.
Oh,
So it was higher.
Red Knot's a 50-50.
Yeah, I was here, 50-50, so that's a much better deal.
Yeah.
We get 50%, and the developer gets 50% for cost of the infrastructure improvements that we make.
That's it for
Any other
now.
questions?
Good question, thank you.
For now. I
Really
guess.
appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. State your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. My name is Zachary Metz. I currently live up on the hill on Lincoln Avenue as a renter, but my wife and I are closing on the house at 618 3rd Avenue. So we will be homeowners and taxpayers here in Dayton. Hello, taxpayers, and hello, council members. I am a student at Chase Law School at Northern Kentucky University.
2 graduates right here, on both ends here.
And my wife is a graduate of CCM. She holds a master's degree in music education. She owns a small business over in Bellevue. She owns her own voice studio. And we vehemently oppose this tax raise. As new homeowners, we've been looking all over the place to where we wanted to move, and we had fallen in love with the city, living up on the hill, and wanted to move much closer to the business district area. We were happy to find this place that we did, and we are closing at $130,000. The cost that the PVA valued this at for the past, for previous in 2019 was $39,000. In 2020, it was valued at $46,000. It was bought in February of this year at $55,000. The house was flipped and is now increasing from last year's tax rate 282%. to what we will be paying on our taxes. So I believe that not only with the large structures that are being built around here that are going up in value that we've already discussed, but there are residential properties doing much of the same thing. I know that you said that you would not see this money until 22, and that your hope would be that taxes could go down next year. But I'm under the understanding that taxes will likely go down next year because this budget, or because the value of the city will be increasing, not because of anything that the council will be doing to lower these taxes. I believe it will be much like 2020, where the value of the city went up and the city still took the 4% on it. So I just wanted to express my opposition to this in the sense that it can scare off new home buyers like myself and my wife, and just really get a better understanding. I appreciate the slideshow and the discussion that was had with the previous city member, and kind of just to make my expressions and get to know, you know, is what you're saying that you will decrease the taxes, is that coming from council? Is council going to be taking another 4% increase next year when the budget goes up, or when the city value goes up? Or will council be keeping the tax rate where it is in the future?
It will depend on where we are with our, when we go through the budget process, what the budget looks like, so it's too early to tell. Now we'll make a recommendation based on where I think we need to go, but one thing you have to remember, if we don't take that money, it compounds, so the 4% increase, it's gone forever, and our costs continue to go up every year, just like yours do. So if we don't take the 4% increase, we're actually hurting ourselves and our citizens, and our fire department, our police department. So in my experience here and in the city of Covington, where city manager, I've most always, in most city administrators, recommend taking 4%, because you're basically throwing money away if you do not take 4%, especially if you're reducing your tax rate because your overall value is increasing.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. I do appreciate it. And I do, my feelings do go out to the firefighters and the police department workers who are struggling in this time. And I just wanted to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metz.
And by the way, we have a number of openings on boards in the city. If you are interested in participating, I'd love to talk to you about it.
Definitely interested.
Okay.
I was gonna say, wow, thanks for the offer, man. I'm slighted.
Ms. Sutter, we can
Just email me to hear it.
You even came to my house, I offered you a hot dog.
That was my favorite council field trip ever.
Just as a clarification on this whole subject, our property tax, this is a state law, that we cannot take in more than 4% of revenue than the previous year, okay? Again, if we double our property value, we can knock it down to half the percentage rate of what it is now. So that's a state law.
Mm-hmm.
We could take it down to 0, but that's the maximum that we can take is the 4% of revenue versus the previous year. But the property tax, if you look at our budget, the property tax is only about 25% of our total income. So you were asking how we're gonna make up the rest of the money if we're limited by this only 4% per year. That's where we have to look at either increased property values,
Right.
in many cases, people paying Dayton tags and Dayton insurance instead of having the freeloaders out there.
More jobs.
More infill, so that we have more properties to be able to tax. But the property tax really is only about, what, $1 million out of a $4 million budget. There's a lot of other things that go in there too. Believe me, I don't want to raise my taxes either.
I have another, do I need to go to the,
Yeah, if you'd like to address council meeting, you
I
can.
have to?
Sure, please.
That's the rules, okay. So,
It's better for sound, but.
okay,
Can we move?
Yeah,
Ms.
let's
Wilson?
put Scott there so we can hear.
a question
One
is,
second, Michelle. I wanna make sure that your voice is heard.
okay.
careful, that's high.
It's okay, I put it to hundreds of kids every year. Anyway, so I realized that there was parity between the police and fire in terms of compensation. Was there like an assessment ever so light of what the estimated family contribution is in terms of the city? So I realized that we have the ability to raise the tax by 4% every year, but usually cost of living in terms of compensation for the average family is about 2 to 3. So have we assessed what the median income is here recently to determine, I know it's $400 per whatever, but have we assessed that the families and the homeowners can actually afford that increase, even though it is in some of our minds with steady jobs who didn't lose them during the shutdown? Is that something that's even feasible, or would Dayton be putting themselves in a deeper hole by people not being able to actually pay or willing to pay their taxes?
We have not done an assessment, but that is something that Assistant City Manager are working on as part of our strategic planning process to do that. I think we need to mention, and I think Commissioner, or Councilmember Vesler mentioned this in an email today, he felt a lot of people who rent houses and they don't pay this tax. So it's only the property owners, the landlords are the ones paying the tax. So a lot of people who are at home are thinking they're renting and they're paying a tax. They're not. This is just property owners. So a lot of people in lower economic levels are renting and not owning homes because that's not always the case, but often the case. And so they're not technically paying this tax to landlords.
Well, not technically, they're not the ones writing the check, but
Right.
we've all been renters before at some
Right.
point in time,
And
and
right.
while we're not paying you directly, I pay you indirectly by my rent going up.
Correct. Sure. Correct. Right.
So I just live in a community that is on the lower end of the income, and both of my side-by-side neighbors are property owners, and I'm, not that I'm saying that they won't have it, but I'm concerned that the neighbors who've been there for years, who've had that stagnant property value that was just recently reassessed, that they might not be able to afford this additional tax on their homes simply because they don't have the supplemental income to provide that. So I didn't know what kind of study we've done to see if our citizens who've been here for over the past decade can actually afford it. Now for me, I'm ecstatic that my property has gone up, like so excited. But I can't say that about my neighborhood. So just wanted to get that question out there, since I realize that I've had a steady job, but not everyone in our city has.
Yeah. Just so you know, we recognize that, and in fact, we just recently got a grant to help those folks pay for utilities through federal funding. There's several $100,000 available for people who have problems paying utilities, and we'll be publicizing that very soon because we just signed the paperwork. So we recognize that we are trying to do things to help those folks.
Thank you.
So would you like to serve on a board, Ms. Bishop?
Hmm?
Would you like to serve on a board?
I'm sorry, you gotta take your mask off, I can't hear you.
So would you like to serve on a board?
Yeah, I've been waiting for someone to come
Okay.
get me.
Well, we can do this, all right.
I'm going to give you both my card.
I vote for her. I told her I was gonna be a squeaky wheel.
Let's make a list of available board appointments just for everybody in general.
Yeah, so
That's Ted off topic, but Mr. Barks, our new city assistant administrator, is working on that and is going to put out help on its own.
I just will say we have a position open on P&Z, planning and zoning, board of adjustment, code board. I'm not kidding, civics club, is there one other?
Housing.
And the housing board. So we have 5 boards, we have positions that we need to fill. So.
The appointment is still open for public comment, public questions to city council administration regarding upcoming legislation. So I welcome anybody to please approach the stand if they like. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the public portion of this hearing in 3, 2, and 21, we are closing the public portion of the hearing. So at this point, we would now like to open up the special council meeting. Mr. Neary is visiting with the air conditioning. I believe we have air in here right now.
Yeah, it's pretty warm.
Cool, it's 85.